Okay, here we go. Public opinion, what is it? That is what we're talking about. So, public opinion is just what we think about anything. Now, the most common way this happens is 65% of Americans don't want this. 90% of Americans are in favor of this. Who's going to win the game tonight? 75% of the people think, Michigan is. Everything you see is a poll. That is a percentage. Now, the problem is, where does that poll come from? And those are the pieces that most of the country ignores, yet really impact the way we go about stuff. So, all this is, how do we feel about things? But they often take that result and people manipulate it into the result they want. Winston Churchill has a good line with this, that there are lies, then a swear word lies, and then there are statistics. Those are the three types of lies that the world has. And that's what people do. They take them and they use them in different ways. Okay, so looking at these, Jake?
Honestly, I saw, we were watching like ABC 12 this morning. They had like a poll number. I don't know if it was for Michigan or what. It said they had like a 4% error on it.
4% margin of error. And what that really means, and that's not really that scientific then, because that's a big gap. The smallest you can get it scientifically and be, call it reliable is 3%, which is the goal. Without getting to that mark, that margin of error at 3%, then that's as best as they can get. But what we're talking about first is, where do these come from? Now, most of what we're talking about with our polling results is not about what you think the weather is going to be like or anything like that. It's politics, right? That's the one that we're most concerned about right now. And that is where things come from politically. We talked about two already, religion and family. Gender, we kind of mentioned as that gap. These are your three main sources. Now, if we're talking about a source of where you develop your views, okay, where you develop all of your stances, that is your socialization. Your political socialization is not like who you talk about with politics. It's how did you get your views about politics? And it's a process. This family one, I mentioned that earlier in the week. That is number one for how everybody gets their views. And that is every sample exam that I have ever seen with an AP for government has asked a question about this. Where do most people get their views from? Number one place is your family, your parents, whatever, however you want to phrase it. It starts there. Religion, we talked about that with, the God gap, the social issues. Plays a very big role on your life. That's where you develop all these values. And so it does play a role. With gender, we're talking about the gender gap. Those were the issues that we started with yesterday. Military, gun control, reproductive rights. All of those, we have females on leaning one side and then males leaning to the other. So it is a big influence as well. Lastly, school is kind of referenced a lot, education level. College campuses have been, like U of M, California, Berkeley, Colorado, University of Colorado, even MSU, East Lansing to some extent, liberal places. Kind of the pooling of knowledge. More and more, though, college students are kind of getting distant from the political arena. Not like it used to be. Still there, but not quite what it was. Okay, this is where they come from. All right, this is where your views come from. And now what we're looking at is what tears us apart. The other types of gaps we're talking about. So family, you develop because of your family. Women develop views because of the gender. Then you have religion. You develop the views based on your religion. These are called cleavages for tearing people apart. You're different based on your priorities from a breakdown of country demographics, the United States demographics. That's what I'm saying here. So first, okay, we have social class. how does social class impact anything? What did we talk about yesterday? What was the gap, the divide between social class? What'd you say? Conservative. Upper class tends to be more conservative. Lower class, a little bit more liberal. Why is that the case? What were the issues we talked about with that? What are you worried about? If you're low class, what are you worried about a lot?
Well, aren't liberals like they want the rich taxed more? So like rich, they don't want to be taxed.
It's a taxing issue, a monetary issue for conservatives who are in the upper echelon. And then we have the lower class who want the taxes to be lower for them, but then also the benefactor of more social programs, welfare programs, Medicaid, Medicare, and going that route for the class you belong to. Race and ethnicity is another divide where we talked about minorities. And what is the issue then with most minorities when we talked about African Americans being conservative Democrats? What is the issue they're most concerned about? Is that what you had too? Civil rights, equality. Now, looking at these, okay, African American population, black people voted over 90% for President Obama. Hispanics, not quite so high. Still a minority group, still leaning Democratic, okay, still leaning liberal. But why are they not as loyal to the Democratic Party? Where do Hispanics get a lot of their beliefs? What religion specifically? Catholicism. Very attached there to social issues that don't really align with the Democratic Party. So in those cases, they're kind of, it's got to be a priority thing still. A little bit more than African Americans because of the attachment to Catholicism. Most Hispanic groups, though, are still leaning Democratic. The only one that really doesn't is Cubans. And it must just be based on their emphasis on Catholicism. But most of the other Hispanic groups are. Asians of the minority groups tend to be the most Republican. Not that they're, it's all leaning or anything, but just of the groups, that's kind of where they are. Then the split that we just finished up region, the South tend to be more Republican. You already said it. The emphasis on social issues, historically speaking, as well. And then finally, church. All of those different pieces play a role. All right, so what we have on the back of your sheet is the identifications. When we did that test over the summer, or when you took the test, you were not this or that. It's not always a this or that issue. Things are not that easy. But we tend to be labeled as one or the other because of whomever we vote for. And that's not how it works. We are complex. The country is complex. So having a liberal or a conservative identification doesn't always fit. We need something better. And there are many, many, many. But this is really those quadrants that test kind of give us. Okay, so liberals, you're going to be liberal on both economic and social issues. So, Sam, give me an example of an economic issue. Taxes, business regulations. Those are economic issues. Now tell me an example of a social issue. Abortion, gay marriage, stem cell research, physician-assisted suicide. Those are social issues because you don't have to be all left on every issue. A lot of times, though, it does align with your economic and social take on things. So our different groups are liberal, conservative, and then libertarian and populist. Libertarian. Socially, you are liberal. You talk a lot about liberal issues socially speaking. But then when you get to conservative views, those fall with fiscal responsibility, economic issues. So what would a libertarian want with taxes then? What would a libertarian want to do with taxes? Eamon, what are you doing? Lowering. You're lowering them. What about business regulation? A libertarian wants what with business regulation? Free market. How about then a libertarian with something like physician-assisted suicide? Whatever. The idea about the best way you can think of a libertarian is keep the government out. Keep the government out of our lives. Let us marry whomever we want, do whatever we want with our bodies. Don't tax us, and don't try to regulate our business. And those are why, it's not always so easy to say I'm liberal or conservative, and a libertarian is a very good example. Populist, you flip it. You flip what the positions are. Socially, a populist is pretty conservative. Then economically, they're liberal. So it's kind of the flip of what a libertarian is. Now this, again, is four groups to try to put everybody in the country in. It doesn't work that way. But these are 4 labels that best, I guess, suit people. I think, it's difficult to say you're one of the 4, but it's the best we have. Okay, now, we started talking about polling. That's how we know what people think. But are they always reliable? So after the debate last Monday night, we talked about how Trump was claimed to be the winner on numerous websites. Okay? But where were they from? Well, one of them, it was like Breitbart was one, Drudge Report was one, the Conservative View was one, Politico was one. So where is the poll coming from? You're talking about the ABC 12 poll this morning, and they only briefly talked about who was asked. It does matter. They have to be scientific. And there are qualifications that make something scientific when it comes to a poll. So when you see something on a website, my guess is it is not a scientific poll. If you go to a scientific polling website like Gallup, has anyone ever heard of Gallup polling? Noah, can you go to Gallup right now? You've got your, go to gallup.com. They are a reliable scientific polling website company because of how they poll. They do specific things that are necessary. And these are the questions you have to ask. Who did the poll? Okay, if there's a poll that says 80% of the people are going to vote for Hillary Clinton, that's released in the Argus, is anyone going to question that? You guys would just take it and accept it? 80% of the town is going to vote for Hillary Clinton? Are you kidding me? That is not... Who did the poll? Why did they do it? What is the point? Noah? What's the biggest one on there? Is there one that's on there first?
Yeah, it's on the front page. There's one working life.
Okay. The one that Gallup is really known for is the presidential approval rating, which we'll get to. But these are all important questions to ask. Who paid for the poll? Did Republicans pay for it? Did Democrats? Did business owners? Did women pay for it? Did men pay for it? What was the end game? How many people were questioned? How were they chosen? Were they picked because... think about it. If you ask somebody who's at a Michigan State football game, who do you think is going to win? Well, it's at Michigan State, so the majority of the stadium is going to be rooting for... So that matters. How are they chosen? Because they're at the game? No, that is a very skewed poll then. You might like the result. You might use it to, kind of support your view, but it really doesn't matter. It's not scientific. A few other things with it. So, okay, I want to show you this right now. Actually, why don't we just come down to it? The first or the last question. Do participants know anything about the topic? Raise your hand only if you want to respond with a yes or a no. If you know what I'm saying, do not react, please. How many of you think that conservatives, or this is a conservative question that the results were from, do you think it would be a good idea to just go over and bomb Agrabah? How many of you feel like it would be just good to just go bomb Agrabah? Raise your hand if you think if that'd be good. How many of you think it wouldn't be a good idea? Okay. All right. Thanks. Now, let me pull this up. This is a public policy polling. Now, it actually wasn't scientific in terms of the number. Okay. This is mainly done to, right here, would you support or oppose bombing Agrabah? Okay. Did anybody chuckle at that? Why, Olivia?
This advertises the country from the movie Aladdin, and it's not. Yeah.
This was a question that was asked to Republican and Democratic voters. This section was from Republicans. It's not. Don't even think that Democrats wouldn't have the same response. It would probably just be opposed. But you have to know something about it. And I think you guys just reacted because I'm a teacher and I asked you a question. You thought, I think your point still remains. It's not a good idea to go bomb somebody just to bomb them. But look at this. These people, you would hope maybe are not sure because they don't think it's a real town. But, I mean, this is a problem. That is not a real place. No, not a real place. Okay, let's keep going, though. Looking at these questions. What? Okay, let's keep looking at these questions. Are the results based on the answers? Remember, think about what was asked of the person. That is a very important question. President Obama's approval rating is actually the highest it's been since he was second term. What? 54%. It's been well below 50. The question that is asked, though, is, do you approve or do you disapprove of President Obama's, do you approve or disapprove of the way President Obama is handling his job? That is the question. So you have two options then. You can say, I approve or I disapprove. It matters because if this, let's say, how are they asked? In person? Let's say a black person comes up and asks you a question about Black Lives Matter. Are you going to answer them in a way that you would if it was an anonymous one? I would hope that you would, just because of, it'd be, I guess, a trustworthy thing to do from my end, just being honest about it. But do you think the whole country would? No, of course not. Or if a woman asked you a question about gender equality, are you going to answer it the same way you would if it was anonymous? Depends on your view, probably. But what it can do is it can change the results of the poll. So if they don't do it right, it changes the results. And that is what statistics show. Polling shows. I mean, did you know that 70% of statistics in this country are made up on the spot? Like that one? Thanks, Chase. I got at least a chuckle out of him, and he knew what I was doing. Thanks, Michael. But it matters. Now, how about this one? Millions of children are starving in this country. They go to bed hungry. So, do you support welfare programs for the poor? Is that a fair question? No, I'm making you feel emotional about millions of children starving, and there are. But it's a loaded, biased question. It's a loaded, biased question. It has to be unbiased, and you have to say both sides. Do you believe that everybody in this country should be given an opportunity to have housing so they don't freeze to death? I mean, that's an awful type of question. Those give results that are not accurate based on what the country actually wants. Okay, so there are a few of your identifications this chapter that really are just from this, okay? And what Jake was talking about right at the beginning when we were talking about polling was the margin of error, which we'll get to. But these are important pieces for a poll to be scientific. And while, it's a very short chapter, we're talking more about the actual results of polls, where do people view it, blah, 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 blah. This is very well liked by the College Board. This has been a free response question entirely. Like, how do you make a scientific poll? I don't know. It is important to evaluate it, don't get me wrong, but I feel like those are specifics that if you were just reading it, you might have overlooked. But representative sample. You have to be representative of the population you are saying you are talking about. So if you're talking about high school students, who should you ask? High school students. Whatever you're claiming the result to be has to be representative of who you ask. And everybody who is a high school student has to have the same chance of being selected. That makes it a random sample. Because if it's not random and you only ask juniors from Owasso High School, that is not representative of high school students. That's not a random sample. You are targeting. Now, a quota sample is where that would occur. If you are saying it's only going to be females from the junior class in Owasso, you're looking for that quota. You're looking for a specific group. A quota, you're filling whatever it is your target is. That is the quota sample. So though it changes then. It's no longer a big bold claim. You have to go down to what the quota actually is. All right, sampling error. If I conduct a poll and Mr. Owens conducts a poll and I say 40% of this class is extremely excited about Glad Hour, and he says 100% of people are excited about Glad Hour, which is what the number should be. It's Happy Day. Remember that, not just Glad. It's Happy Day. That is a 60% sampling error. Now, again, that's a huge gap, but a sampling error is just you take two polls that you claim the same result, and what is the difference between them? Okay, that's just a measurement of how reliable the different polls are. And then the scientific part. This one has to happen. If it doesn't have this, it is not scientific. Plus or minus 3%. Plus or minus 3%. We'll hold off with Mr. Phillips. Yes, you still have to go to Glad Hour. Take your Chromebooks. Quiet and listen. Okay, hey, we're not done. Slow up. Now look, plus or minus 3%. What that means is, statistically speaking, you have enough data that if you make a claim that 46% of the school, or it'd be bigger, the country, whatever, support something, you can expect that if you actually asked everybody, and you did it with a representative sample, a random sample, an unbiased and not loaded question, if you did that, you would expect the results to be within 3 percentage points of whatever you predicted, meaning from 43 to 49%. So that's why the polls about Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump right now, if you say 46 to 44% expected voting support, that is too close right now to really say, yep, she's in the lead. Because if you look at your margin of error would actually say plus or minus 3%, which means Hillary could go down to 43, Trump could actually go up to 47, and it'd be completely flipped. So when it's that close, it's not that strong to get to. So books tomorrow, chapter questions are right here if you didn't happen to grab one yesterday. Get started on them. Have a great, happy, glad day. What?